The year was 1513. The streets of Rome pulsed with whispers of change, of power, of shadows shifting across the eternal city. Here, among towering cathedrals and crumbling ruins, arrived an aging genius, Leonardo da Vinci. His hair had grown white, his beard long and flowing, his hands marked by years of invention, artistry, and endless sketches that had sought to capture the very essence of nature itself. And yet, behind the brilliance of his mind, there lingered a cloud of melancholy, as though the secrets he carried were too heavy for one lifetime. Leonardo's arrival in Rome was not triumphant, nor was it celebrated with fanfare. He came under the patronage of Giuliano de' Medici, brother of the newly installed Pope Leo X. The Vatican at this time was both a sanctuary of divine authority and a fortress of political power. Artists, architects, and engineers flooded into the city, each eager to secure the Pope's favor. Among them were Raphael, at the height of his glory, and Michelangelo, battling with stone and paint to bring his visions to life. These men were young, competitive, and adored by patrons. Leonardo, in contrast, entered as a man past his prime, his greatest works already behind him, or so it seemed. In Rome, the shadow of the Great Schism still hung over the papacy, though decades had passed since rival popes had torn the church in two. The Vatican, determined to centralize its authority, became the heart of what we now call the High Renaissance. Here, power and creativity were intertwined, each feeding the other. Yet Leonardo, master of so many disciplines, found himself adrift. He was asked by the Pope to contribute designs for draining the Pontine marshes, a swampy expanse that bred malaria and defied human habitation. His sketches, intricate and visionary, displayed a mind capable of reshaping landscapes. But they were not used. Rome's rulers saw in Leonardo not a master to be trusted with monumental works, but a relic of an earlier age. And so for 3 years, Leonardo lingered in Rome, observing, sketching, dreaming, yet largely overlooked. Imagine him wandering through the ruins, staring at the broken columns of ancient emperors, sketchbook in hand, mind racing with questions of eternity, decay, and the power of nature. He was a man surrounded by glory, but denied a stage. In Raphael's Vatican rooms, the frescoes glowed with divine light. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel thundered with muscular figures of creation and judgment. But Leonardo, the one who had once painted the Mona Lisa's enigmatic smile and the Last Supper's silent drama, was left to the margins. By 1516, his Roman chapter had closed. An invitation from beyond the Alps would change everything. Francis I of France, a young king barely into his 20s, had ascended the throne in 1515 with dreams of expanding both his empire and his culture. Fascinated by art, science, and the brilliance of Italy, Francis sought not only the works of masters, but their very minds. And so, he extended his hand to Leonardo da Vinci, not merely as an artist, but as a companion, a sage, a man whose conversation was as valuable as his brush. For Leonardo, weary of rejection in Italy, and watching patrons turn to younger rivals, the offer was salvation. In the autumn of 1516, with his loyal pupils Melzi and Salai, Leonardo crossed the mountains into France. He carried with him his notebooks, his unfinished canvases, and models of inventions, flying machines, war engines, hydraulic wonders. He also carried something invisible yet profound, the weight of unfulfilled ambition. France received him not as a has-been, but as a treasure. Francis I installed Leonardo at the manor of Cleux, near Amboise, a quiet village nestled in the Loire Valley. Here, in a house surrounded by vineyards and forests, Leonardo found peace. The king often visited, speaking with him daily, captivated not so much by his paintings, but by his intellect, his ability to weave together science, philosophy, and art. To Francis, Leonardo was a living oracle. But peace did not erase time's toll. Scholars believe Leonardo began to suffer paralysis, likely a stroke, which weakened his right arm. Though he retained control of his fingers, he could no longer paint as he once had. His final years were marked less by grand new creations and more by reflection, organization, and the attempt to bring order to the chaos of his life's work. Thousands of pages filled with observations on anatomy, hydraulics, mechanics, and cosmology surrounded him, so many that no single man could hope to arrange them all. Among these pages was the famous red chalk self-portrait, created around 1512, showing a stern, aged man with eyes both piercing and sorrowful. Was it truly Leonardo's likeness? Most believe so, and in its lines we see the burden of genius, the loneliness of one who had peered too deeply into nature's secrets. As his body weakened, his mind seemed to turn darker. His late sketches are filled with apocalyptic imagery, floods consuming cities, storms breaking mountains, visions of nature's wrath. Perhaps it was the memory of the Arno River's flood from his youth, or perhaps a meditation on the destructive power that humans, with their machines and wars, could unleash. Whatever the source, Leonardo's imagination seemed consumed by endings. On May 2, 1519 in Clue, Leonardo da Vinci died at the age of 67. Legend claims that Francis I was by his side, holding his head as he breathed his last. Whether true or not, it symbolizes the bond between the French king and the Italian master, a relationship built on admiration and curiosity rather than mere patronage. Leonardo was buried in the church of St. Florentin in Amboise, but the church was demolished centuries later, and his final resting place was lost. Yet Leonardo's death was not an end. His notebooks, numbering perhaps 20,000 pages, became his true legacy. Only about 7,000 survive today, scattered across Europe, from Windsor Castle to Milan. Within them lies the mind of a man who refused to see art and science as separate realms. In his Trattato della Pittura, compiled after his death, Leonardo argued that painting was a science, a discipline that demanded the same rigor as geometry or anatomy. To him, the artist was not merely an imitator of nature, but a creator who distilled its essence. He wrote of water, the driver of nature, fascinated both by its gentle flow and its violent floods. He wrote of flight, sketching wings, gliders, and even a parachute centuries before such devices existed. He wrote of the human body with precision born of dissection, believing that to paint a figure truly one must first understand its bones and sinews. And yet, for all he abandoned commissions, left projects unfinished, experimented disastrously with materials, as in The Last Supper, whose experimental medium caused it to deteriorate rapidly. He could frustrate patrons, disappear into thought, and chase dreams that seemed impractical. But therein lay his greatness. He dared. Innovation, after all, demands risk. Today we remember Leonardo not merely for what he completed, but for the breadth of his vision. He lived in exile from certainty, always reaching beyond the limits of his time. His illegitimate birth barred him from formal education in Latin or the universities. Yet he taught himself enough to converse with mathematicians and philosophers. His restless movements across Italy and into France reflected the instability of his era, yet they also allowed him to absorb influences from Milan to Florence to Rome. In life, he was admired as an artist. In death, he was revealed as something far more, a polymath whose thoughts spanned the heavens, the earth, and the human soul. He was, in the truest sense, the Renaissance man, and yet questions remain. How many of his paintings were truly completed by his hand? How many of his inventions, never built, were visions ahead of their time or fantasies doomed to fail? How many secrets of his genius have been lost in the missing pages of his notebooks? These mysteries keep Leonardo alive in our imagination. 5 centuries later, as we gaze upon the Mona Lisa's smile or pore over his sketches of flying machines, we sense that Leonardo still speaks to us, not with answers, but with questions. Who are we to create, to dream, to push against the boundaries of knowledge? What is art, if not the science of seeing? And what is science, if not the art of asking? Leonardo da Vinci's final journey from the shadows of Rome to the quiet of France was not the decline of a genius, but the transformation of a man into a legend. In the Loire Valley of France, not far from the royal chateau where the court of Francis I basked in opulence, stood a modest residence called Clue. It was not a palace of glittering marble or echoing halls, but a manor of quiet stone walls and heavy doors, its gardens veiled in morning mist and its chambers heavy with silence. To the casual eye it seemed unremarkable, yet within those walls unfolded one of history's most poignant finales, the last years of Leonardo da Vinci. To the villagers who caught glimpses of him, the figure seemed almost spectral, a man with hair like spun silver and eyes that still burned with an unearthly sharpness. Whispers spread that he was a sorcerer, a prophet, perhaps even something more than human, for his drawings captured not only bodies and faces, but the very secrets of nature itself. And yet, behind the walls of Clue, this man of unearthly reputation was slowly consumed by very human frailty. Leonardo had come to France in 1516 at the invitation of King Francis I, who revered him as a living wonder, a treasure of genius to be honored in his kingdom. He had brought with him a handful of his greatest works and an immeasurable ocean of notes and drawings, sketches of machines that never flew, dissections of bodies that never reached the medical academies, and visions of floods and storms that belonged as much to prophecy as to science. Now, as he entered his final years, these papers seemed to multiply and spread across clouts like living entities, spilling over tables, stacked into tottering piles, tucked into chests and corners, as though they were fragments of a great labyrinth that even their creator no longer knew how to escape. It was here that his faithful pupil and companion, Francesco Melzi, became his anchor. Young, devoted, and patient, Melzi served him not only as a secretary, but as a caretaker and son. He carried his papers, prepared his meals, wrote his words when the master's own hand faltered, and sat with him through the long nights when paralysis stiffened his right arm and pain gnawed at his body. Where others might have seen a weary old man, Melzi saw only the immense light that still glowed within, a mind unbroken by age, even as the flesh weakened around it. Their bond was profound, born of loyalty, but also of love in the purest sense, the love of one who recognizes he is preserving not just a man, but a universe of thought. Within Klux, time felt suspended. The days drifted between the labor of attempting to impose order upon chaos and the nights when Leonardo, his voice low but steady, dictated fragments of his endless musings. He spoke of rivers and stars, of the mechanics of flight and the inner workings of the human heart, of painting and philosophy, of beauty and decay. Melzi listened, transcribed, and filed the words into neat volumes, yet even he must have known that the vastness of Leonardo's knowledge could never truly be contained. It was like attempting to gather the sea into jars. Leonardo himself understood this tragedy, and perhaps it haunted him in those final years more than death itself. The certainty that so much of what he had discovered would vanish with him, unshared and uncomprehended. Illness weighed heavily upon him. Accounts suggest that he suffered partial paralysis, leaving his right hand stiff and useless. For a man whose identity had always been bound to the act of drawing, sketching, and painting, this was no ordinary loss. It was a cruel irony, as though fate itself had silenced the very hand that had painted the Last Supper and envisioned machines that might conquer air and water. Yet Leonardo bore it with quiet endurance. He could no longer paint with the mastery he once wielded, but his mind refused to rest. He turned instead to dictation, to reflection, to the desperate but noble task of bringing some coherence to the mountain of notes he had gathered. The manor became a labyrinth not just of paper but of memory. Visitors described him as both weary and luminous, a figure cloaked in the dignity of old age, yet animated by flashes of youthful fervor. To those who saw him in these years, he seemed both ancient and timeless, as though the spirit within him refused to bend to the failing body. His eyes retained their legendary intensity, so piercing that those who entered his presence felt as though he sketched their essence in an instant, dissecting not their flesh, but their very souls. As the seasons turned and his health declined, Leonardo seemed ever more preoccupied with mortality. He had dissected bodies to understand life, had studied storms to understand destruction, had filled page upon page with musings on water, light, and air. But now he pondered the ultimate dissolution, the end of his own existence. He confessed regrets, perhaps about projects abandoned, manuscripts left unpublished, inventions unrealized. And yet, even in regret, there was serenity. His genius had always been restless, but in Klux it began to accept that no single lifetime could hold all that he had envisioned. The universe was too vast, the mysteries too many, and even Leonardo da Vinci could not grasp them all. In April of 1519, he grew weaker and the paralysis spread. Melzi remained beside him, as did attendants who cared for his frail body with reverence. On May 2nd of that year, Leonardo da Vinci died within the quiet walls of Klux. Legend, perhaps born from the imagination of admirers, claims that he died in the arms of King Francis I himself, though history cannot confirm this. What is certain is that his departure was felt as the extinguishing of a rare and radiant flame. He was laid to rest in the chapel of Saint Florentin at Amboise, though in the centuries that followed, wars and destruction erased the precise location of his tomb. His final resting place, like so much of his life, became a mystery swallowed by time. But Leonardo did not vanish. Melzi, faithful beyond death, preserved as much of his master's work as he could, carrying manuscripts back to Italy, compiling them, guarding them against neglect. Without him, Leonardo's notebooks might have disappeared into dust, his visions forgotten. Instead, fragments endured, scattering through the centuries into the hands of collectors, scholars, and dreamers. Some pages remain locked away, others lost, still others resurfacing centuries later, revealing thoughts as fresh as if written yesterday. And so Clou, that quiet manor in the Loire Valley, became not just the place where Leonardo da Vinci died, but the crucible in which his legacy was sealed. His last years were not years of public triumph, but of private struggle, a struggle against frailty, against time, against the enormity of his own unfinished genius. He was a man of infinite curiosity, confined within a finite span, and in that tension lies the enduring fascination with his life. The world remembers him not only for his paintings, but for his unquenchable hunger to know, to see, to capture the essence of existence itself. Even now, centuries later, one can imagine the mist curling around Clous at dawn, the silent chambers filled with papers, the old man with silver hair dictating thoughts that leap between stars and rivers, wings and bones, beauty and decay. In those final years, he was no longer the vibrant young apprentice of Florence, nor the celebrated master of Milan, nor even the guest of popes in Rome. He was something rarer, a mind confronting the limits of mortality, seeking to leave behind as much of itself as possible before the final breath. And though his body failed him, his spirit succeeded. For Leonardo da Vinci, even in decline, was never diminished. He remained until the very end what he had always been, a mystery, a marvel, and a man who belonged as much to eternity as to time. The spring of 1519 came softly to the Loire Valley, a land of mist and gentle hills, where rivers curled like silver threads beneath the castles of kings. In the manor of Clou, where old stone walls pressed in with a silence that seemed to listen, an aged figure lay upon his bed, wrapped not only in linen, but in the final hours of his life. This was Leonardo da Vinci, the restless flame of Florence, the master of Milan, the enigmatic presence who had once wandered the palaces of Rome. To the world beyond those walls, he was a legend, a sorcerer of images and ideas, a man whose hands had shaped visions that outlived dynasties. Yet within that chamber, he was merely a mortal, frail and fading, his breath shallow, his right hand long since stiffened by paralysis, but his mind still alight with unyielding fire. Those who gathered near his bed saw a face marked by time, lined by years of searching and ceaseless labor, yet softened by a serenity that seemed to whisper of secrets glimpsed beyond the edge of mortality. His eyes, though dimmed by pain, still held that ancient brilliance, a depth that had measured the geometry of rivers, the arc of birds in flight, the folds of clouds, the anatomy of life itself. Francesco Melzi, the devoted pupil who had become as a son, remained at his side, cradling his master's fragile hand, his own youth bearing the sorrow of inevitability. Servants moved softly in the dim light, and upon the table nearby lay stacks of papers and drawings, scattered and disordered, as if the vast machinery of his mind had spilled into chaos at the very threshold of eternity. It is said, whether truth or legend none can prove, that King Francis I, who admired Leonardo, not merely as an artist, but as a soul touched by divinity, came to visit in those last days. The tale claims he knelt beside the bed, lifting Leonardo's head into his arms as the old master's spirit prepared to depart, a monarch bowing not to nobility of blood, but to the nobility of genius. Whether the scene unfolded so or whether it was embroidered by time scarcely matters, for it has become part of the tapestry of his myth, a symbol that genius itself was honored even by kings. On the 2nd of May, as spring ripened in France and the blossoms filled the air with fragrance, Leonardo da Vinci exhaled his final breath. He was 67 years old. The room fell into a silence so deep that it seemed to echo with the absence of his voice. Melzi wept softly, servants crossed themselves, and beyond the walls the world continued heedless. Rivers flowed, swallows darted, Leaves trembled in the wind. Nature, his eternal muse, carried on indifferently, though within that small chamber, it felt as though the universe had tilted. They prepared his body with care, wrapping him in garments of simplicity, his face serene as though still contemplating a vision unseen. He was carried through Amboise in solemn procession, torches flickering in the dusk, prayers murmured by clerics whose words could scarcely capture the magnitude of the man they buried. Melzi followed close behind, bearing not wealth nor titles, but the weight of his master's manuscripts, the chaotic sea of drawings and writings that remained the true relics of his genius. His body was interred in the chapel of Saint-Florentine, within sight of the royal chateau, where kings and courtiers could walk past and remember that here lay the greatest mind their age had known. Yet Leonardo, who had built machines to defy death, who had dissected the body to understand the mystery of life, who had painted the soul into faces, would not rest undisturbed. Time, that enemy he could never conquer, reached even into his grave. The chapel fell into neglect, the stones crumbling, the walls surrendering to ruin. Wars swept across the land, and at last the church itself was demolished, its stones carted away, its memory scattered. With it vanished the grave of Leonardo da Vinci. No monument endured, no sacred marker guided pilgrims to the bones of the master. His remains were lost to dust, mingled perhaps with earth, carried away perhaps by careless hands, or lying still beneath unknown soil. The final resting place of Leonardo da Vinci became not a place but a question, a mystery that deepened the aura of his name. Some centuries later, bones were found nearby and attributed to him, though certainty has never been reached. The ambiguity itself became part of his legacy. For what tomb could contain him? What stone could bear his weight? His life was not meant to end in marble epitaphs, but to scatter like seeds across time, germinating in every hand that opened his notebooks, in every gaze that lingered upon the smile of the Mona Lisa, in every attempt to pierce the hidden patterns of the world. His death, though quiet, became a paradox, the closing of a mortal life and the unsealing of an immortal myth. For Leonardo da Vinci did not rest in Amboise. He lingered in every question unanswered, every design unfinished, every fragment of thought that refused to vanish. His grave was lost, but his essence became ungraspable, diffused into the air of history like the mist upon the Loire, impossible to pin to earth, destined to haunt eternity. The day of his passing in May 1519 settled into history like a shadow stretching endlessly across the centuries, and yet for those who lived it, the moment felt intimate, fragile, almost unbearably human. Within the manor of Clooks, candles were lit against the encroaching dusk, their flames wavering as though reluctant to hold steady in the presence of death. The silence after Leonardo's last breath was heavy, broken only by the rustling of cloth and the soft weeping of his attendants. Francesco Melzi, devoted pupil and inheritor of his vast intellectual estate, lingered longest at the bedside. He gazed at the face of his master, once animated by tireless curiosity, now serene in stillness, and saw in its repose not merely mortality, but the reflection of a life lived in pursuit of infinity. For Melzi, grief was not only personal loss, it was the crushing awareness that an era itself had closed. Yet even as those in Clooks mourned, word of his death spread like ripples upon water. Whispers traveled across the Loire, through Amboise, up into the halls of the chateau, and eventually into the ears of Francis I. Whether or not the king truly cradled Leonardo at the hour of death remains uncertain, yet what is certain is his reverence. Francis had regarded Leonardo as more than a craftsman, more than an artist for hire. He had seen in him a living embodiment of genius. To the monarch, Leonardo represented something eternal, the merging of art, science, and philosophy into a single flame of human possibility. When news reached him that this flame had gone out, even the king is said to have bowed his head in solemn respect. The funeral rites were arranged with the dignity befitting both the man and the esteem in which he was held. Clerics in dark robes carried their censers, filling the air with incense that curled upward in ghostly tendrils, as though seeking to carry his spirit toward the heavens he had so often tried to measure with geometry and observation. Townsfolk gathered in quiet awe, not always fully comprehending the breadth of the man's achievements, but aware nonetheless that someone of extraordinary stature was being laid to rest among them. The coffin, simple and unadorned compared to the majesty of kings, bore within it not only the body of Leonardo, but the symbol of all his unfinished dreams. He was laid to rest in the chapel of Saint Florentin in Amboise, within sight of the royal chateau itself. To those who witnessed it, the location seemed fitting, close enough to the grandeur of power to remind future generations that even kings had admired him, but quiet enough to reflect the solitude that had so often defined his life. Earth was cast upon the coffin, prayers were intoned, and the name of Leonardo da Vinci was committed to eternity. And yet, as with so much in his life, time would not grant permanence to this resting place. Decades and centuries passed, and with them came neglect. The chapel that had once guarded his remains fell into disrepair, its stones cracked by frost, its roof sagging under the weight of seasons. Wars and revolutions swept across France, bringing fire and hammer to monuments that once seemed eternal. At last, the chapel of Saint Florentin was demolished entirely, its stones carted away, its memory eroded as though history itself sought to obscure the precise resting place of the man who had sought to uncover every hidden law of nature. With the demolition, Leonardo's grave was lost. No careful marker preserved it. No monumental tomb bore his likeness. The earth swallowed him as it swallows all men, and his bones were scattered, their exact location erased from certainty. In later centuries, bones were discovered near the ruins, fragile and incomplete, accompanied by fragments of stone that bore inscriptions once linked to Leonardo. Scholars speculated, historians debated, but absolute certainty never emerged. Were these truly his remains, or those of another, forgotten and mistakenly identified? The ambiguity persisted, and in that ambiguity a peculiar poetry arose. For Leonardo da Vinci, who had lived a life woven with mystery, who had hidden codes in his notebooks, who had left works unfinished as though defying completion, perhaps it was only fitting that even his grave refused to be known. His lost tomb became a metaphor for his essence. Leonardo could not be contained by stone, by inscription, by geography. He lived in fragments, in notebooks scattered across Europe, in paintings whose subjects seemed to smile at secrets forever withheld, in inventions that anticipated centuries yet to come. The absence of a grave gave him a strange immortality, one that could not be confined to a plot of earth. Instead, he became untethered, his spirit wandering through time itself. The Loire Valley held the memory of his final days, but the world carried his presence. Melzi, faithful to the end, inherited the burden of preserving this presence. In his grief, he gathered the thousands of pages Leonardo had left behind, pages filled with sketches, diagrams, notes, half-formed theories, and complete marvels. To Melzi, these were not merely scraps of paper. They were the very continuation of his master's voice, a legacy more enduring than marble or bronze. He spent his own life attempting to protect and preserve them, though time and neglect would scatter them as well, sending Leonardo's thoughts adrift into libraries, private collections, and hidden archives. Each page, whenever uncovered, felt like a relic, not of a saint, but of a man who had peered further into the workings of the universe than perhaps anyone before him. Leonardo's death at 67 was the end of flesh, but not of story. His burial in Amboise was meant to secure his place among the honored dead, yet history itself conspired to elevate him further, transforming him into something no monument could encompass. For where others left tombs and statues, Leonardo left enigmas, a smile that still defies interpretation, machines that seem to anticipate modern marvels, ideas that suggest he glimpsed truths not yet revealed to the rest of humanity. His lost grave became a mirror of his life, elusive, fascinating, impossible to fix with certainty. And so when we imagine Leonardo da Vinci's final moments, when we picture his funeral and the lost chapel of Saint Florentin, we do not see merely the death of a man. We see the closing of a chapter that could never truly end. We see a genius who dissolved into mystery at the last, whose bones may be gone, but whose essence endures everywhere. He died in Amboise, yet he lives in every canvas that bears his touch, in every diagram that reflects his restless intellect, in every dream of flight, every sketch of anatomy, every attempt to bridge the gulf between the seen and the unseen. His body vanished, but his presence became eternal. To this day, when scholars, artists, or dreamers speak the name Leonardo da Vinci, they do so not with certainty of place, but with awe at possibility. His death was not silence, but resonance. His grave was lost, but in being lost, it was given to the world entire. He belongs not to Amboise alone, not to Florence, not to Milan, not to France, but to all of humanity. The mystery of his burial is simply another veil in the endless enigma of his life. Then let us deepen the shadows and thicken the atmosphere, for Leonardo's death is not a mere line in the Chronicle of 1519, but a threshold into legend, a door half closed yet never sealed. His passing invites not only the facts of history, but the whispers of mystery, the echoes of voices that have carried across 5 centuries, telling and retelling the tale until it swells with the weight of myth. On that spring morning in Cloux, when breath left his body and silence overtook the chamber, it was said that the air itself seemed unwilling to move. Servants lingered at doorways, afraid to cross the threshold, as though death in the presence of so great a man might prove contagious, might pull them too into the abyss. Francesco Melzi knelt at the bedside, eyes red and swollen, clutching the hand of the master who had guided him not only in art, but in life itself. To Melzi, the loss was unbearable. The light of his world had gone out. Yet he must have also felt a strange burden descend. For in that moment he became the custodian of the labyrinthine mind of Leonardo da Vinci. Some accounts, embroidered with the romantic flourishes of later centuries, tell that King Francis himself entered that room, standing over the deathbed of the genius he so admired. Painters centuries later would capture the imagined scene, the monarch cradling Leonardo's fading body in his arms, tears in his eyes, lips whispering words of gratitude and farewell. Historians debate the accuracy of this tale, yet its persistence is telling. People long to believe that a king would bend in reverence before the figure of Leonardo, that genius could command homage even from the crown. Whether true or not, the story became part of the tapestry of legend, weaving death with dignity, grief with grandeur. The funeral rites carried the solemnity of both state and sanctity. Amboise, usually stirred by the bustling life of the royal court, fell hushed as words spread through streets and marketplaces. Villagers who had glimpsed the eccentric old man in flowing robes, sketching or pondering by the riverside, now whispered in awe that they had lived near a figure whose name would outlast them all. The procession wound its way toward the chapel of Saint Florentin, darkly robed clerics leading, their chants echoing against the stone. Candles flickered in the breeze, casting fragile halos upon faces drawn tight with sorrow. And then, as the earth swallowed the coffin, it seemed the world itself shifted. A man who had spent his life mapping the bones of bodies, charting the flight of birds, sketching the muscles of horses and the mechanics of machines, was reduced to dust. The irony was cruel and yet poetic. The master of anatomy and the celebrant of form himself yielded his form to dissolution, but the grave of Leonardo would not remain secure. Time, ever the thief, chipped away at stone and memory. Wars raged across the Loire Valley, leaving scars upon villages, cathedrals, and chapels alike. Centuries later, during the convulsions of the French Revolution, monuments fell with ferocity. The chapel of Saint Florentin was dismantled stone by stone, its foundations torn open, its graves desecrated. Whatever careful records may once have marked Leonardo's exact resting place vanished into smoke and rubble. His remains were scattered, or perhaps moved without care, so that generations after would search in vain for certainty. This loss, however, birthed legend. In the 19th century, when bones were discovered amid the ruins, some bore fragments of inscriptions that hinted at the name Leonardus. Antiquarians and scholars alike debated with feverish excitement, had the great man been found at last? The remains were fragile, incomplete, and yet the possibility was intoxicating. Artists imagined skeletons glowing with the aura of genius, while historians warned against hasty claims. The truth remained elusive. Were they his or another's? In this ambiguity, Leonardo's afterlife assumed a mystical cast. For what could be more fitting than for the man whose art concealed enigmas, whose notebooks bristled with coded writings and mirrored scripts, whose paintings whispered secrets across centuries, to vanish even in death? His body disappeared into uncertainty, leaving only questions, much as he had done in life. The missing grave became not a loss, but a symbol. the physical absence underscoring the eternal presence of his ideas. Legends multiplied. Some whispered that secret societies, recognizing the dangerous power of Leonardo's knowledge, spirited away his bones, hiding them with his notebooks so that his genius might never fall into profane hands. Others imagined pilgrims collecting relics, scattering his remains like seeds across Europe, each fragment carrying with it a spark of brilliance. Romantic poets in the 19th century evoked visions of Leonardo's spirit wandering the stars, liberated from the weight of flesh, at last flying with the machines he had so long dreamed to build. And always, Amboise stood as a place of pilgrimage. Travelers crossed rivers and hills to stand near the chateau and imagine where the master might lie. Even without a marked tomb, the valley itself became sanctified. The Loire, winding and glimmering, seemed to carry his spirit in its waters. The trees, bending under the winds of spring, seemed to whisper fragments of his thoughts. To walk in Clou or Amboise was to walk in the shadow of genius, even if no gravestone bore his name. Yet the deeper truth lies not in bones, but in legacy. For Leonardo was never a man of stone permanence. He was a man of restless imagination. Statues crumble, graves vanish, but ideas, once unleashed, travel endlessly. His unfinished works, his scattered notebooks, his daring questions about the body, the heavens, the earth, and the machine all survived him, even as his remains were lost. Indeed, his very disappearance mirrors his nature, elusive, indefinable, ever just beyond the grasp of certainty. When we contemplate his death, we do not merely see the end of a man in Clous, nor even the lost grave in Amboise. We see instead the great paradox of Leonardo da Vinci, a being so deeply human that he bled, aged, and died, and yet so extraordinary that even death could not contain him within a coffin or a chapel. His absence became his monument. His mystery became his immortality. His silence became the loudest echo of all. They say that Leonardo da Vinci carried entire universes within him, worlds so vast and intricate that no canvas, no wall, no marble could ever contain them. His true cathedral was paper, fragile, perishable, yet paradoxically immortal, and upon those thin sheets he built a cosmos of thought. He wrote not as others wrote, in straight lines meant to be read by posterity, but in mirrored script, backward and slanted, as if guarding secrets that only the initiated or the most determined could unlock. To look upon his notebooks is to stand at the threshold of a labyrinth, where every turn reveals another chamber of wonder. Dissected hearts sketched with surgeon's precision, wings modeled on the flight of bats and birds, whirlpools spiraling with the force of nature itself, philosophical musings intertwined with grocery lists, engineering diagrams brushing against playful riddles. It is in these scattered leaves, not in his paintings, not in his sculptures, not even in the architecture of his dreams, that Leonardo left the clearest trace of his restless genius. The scale of it is staggering. He is believed to have filled some 20,000 pages across his lifetime, a torrent of ink that sought to capture everything his insatiable mind encountered. Of those, barely 7,000 remain in our hands today. The rest are gone, scattered into dust, or hidden away in private hoards, or perhaps destroyed in fires that consumed whole libraries during wars. Each missing page is a wound, a lost continent of thought, and scholars speak of them with the reverence of relic hunters chasing the fragments of a holy scripture. What we possess are enough to astonish, yet what is absent whispers with even greater power. For if 7,000 leaves contain so much brilliance, how unfathomable the vision that once stretched across the whole. Among these surviving works lies the Trattato della Pittura, a treatise on painting that transcends the craft of pigment and brush. Leonardo argued that painting was no mere manual labor, no craft to be relegated to artisans, but a science in its own right, a discipline grounded in observation, geometry, optics, and the anatomy of perception. For him, the painter was not a mere decorator, but a philosopher with pigments, capable of revealing the hidden laws of nature through line and shade. He declared painting superior to poetry and music, for while sound fades and words pass into forgetfulness, an image endures, immediate and universal, communicating across cultures without translation. In this, Leonardo was not simply elevating the status of his own profession, he was reshaping the very hierarchy of the arts, setting painting alongside mathematics and natural philosophy as a path toward truth. Yet to read his notebooks is not to find systematic treatises neatly arranged, but rather the scatterings of a mind that leapt restlessly from subject to subject. One page might begin with a geometric puzzle, wander into a study of how light refracts in water, shift suddenly into a sketch of a fetus curled in a womb, and end with a meditation on why the sky is blue. It is as though Leonardo could not stop himself from chasing every glimmer of curiosity, unable or unwilling to impose boundaries upon his thought. And therein lies both the frustration and the glory of his legacy. He left no single magnum opus that could be shelved beside Aristotle's Metaphysics or Newton's Principia. Instead, he left fragments, shards of brilliance, incomplete but radiant, a mosaic whose missing tiles only make the pattern more tantalizing. These notebooks themselves are cloaked in mystery. Some passed into the hands of his devoted pupil, Francesco Melzi, who struggled to preserve them, but was overwhelmed by their sheer quantity. Over time, portions were dispersed, neglected, or even sold by Melzi's heirs, who did not fully grasp the treasure entrusted to them. By the 17th century, collections of Leonardo's writings were scattered across Europe, some jealously guarded in royal libraries, others tucked into private cabinets of curiosity, accessible only to the privileged few. Even now, many rest in hidden vaults, the Codex Leicester, once owned by aristocrats and now by magnates of modern industry, the Codex Atlanticus, massive and sprawling, held in Milan, the Windsor folios, brimming with anatomical studies. Each codex has its own odyssey, its own tale of disappearance and rediscovery, theft and return, a saga worthy of adventure novels. The gaps, however, are as haunting as the pages preserved. Entire treatises he planned were never completed, perhaps never even begun. He dreamed of systematic works on anatomy, on mechanics, on flight, on hydraulics. His dissections of corpses revealed insights into the human body centuries ahead of his time, yet much of this remained hidden until long after medicine had stumbled forward without his aid. His designs for machines, helicopters, tanks, diving suits, automata lay dormant in obscurity, their practical potential unrecognized until later ages. Had his notebooks been published in his lifetime, the trajectory of science itself might have accelerated by centuries. Instead, his genius slumbered in silence, a buried treasure waiting for the world to catch up. And there is another layer to the mystery, Leonardo's own deliberate secrecy. He wrote in mirrored handwriting, not merely as a quirk, but perhaps as a shield, obscuring his thoughts from casual prying eyes. He filled his pages with riddles, allegories, and metaphors, often masking technical observations in poetic guise. Was this the instinct of a man who feared the Inquisition, wary of accusations that his dissections and inquiries trespassed into forbidden realms? Or was it the habit of one who cherished knowledge as a kind of private alchemy, too precious to be freely shared? Whatever the reason, his notebooks remain enigmatic even to this day, requiring decipherment, interpretation, patience. The legends that have grown around these notebooks only deepen their aura. Some say that among the missing volumes are secrets too dangerous to reveal, blueprints for weapons beyond comprehension, formulas for perpetual motion, or cryptic insights into the mysteries of the cosmos. The absence of proof fuels speculation. What if those lost 13,000 pages held the keys to inventions we still struggle to master? The myth persists that hidden vaults or secret orders have safeguarded them, keeping their knowledge from a world not ready to wield it. Rational historians scoff, yet the romance of the idea lingers. Leonardo as the guardian of forbidden truths, his notebooks a modern-day grimoire scattered across centuries. But even stripped of legend, the surviving works alone justify his reputation. They show us a mind that refused to separate art from science, poetry from engineering, philosophy from mechanics. He saw correspondences everywhere, the flow of water mirrored in the curl of hair, the anatomy of the human body echoed in the anatomy of the earth, the mechanics of wings akin to the levers of machines. In this holistic vision, Leonardo prefigured a truth that modern science has only recently begun to embrace again, that knowledge is not confined to silos, that understanding requires seeing patterns across disciplines. His notebooks are not just archives of curiosity, they are a testament to the unity of creation as perceived by one who dared to look at everything with equal wonder. The tragedy, perhaps, is that so much remained unfinished, His contemporaries mocked him for beginning grand projects and abandoning them midway. Yet in retrospect, this very incompletion feels almost fated. How could any finite life have contained the infinity of his imagination? His notebooks are not failures, but fragments of a greater whole that could never be realized in a single lifetime. They are windows into the process of thought itself, more alive in their unfinished sketches than most completed treatises could ever be. In the centuries since, these pages have inspired artists, scientists, poets, and dreamers alike. Anatomists marveled at his dissections, engineers studied his machines, painters absorbed his theories of light and shadow. Poets found in his restless mind a mirror of the Renaissance spirit, boundless, daring, insatiable. Even today, his notes are not relics but provocations, urging us to look more closely, to ask more deeply, to never be satisfied with simple answers. His legacy is not confined to what he discovered, but in the model of inquiry he embodied, to question everything, to see connections where others saw divisions, to pursue knowledge not for utility alone, but for the sheer joy of discovery. Thus, Leonardo's notebooks, though tattered and incomplete, are among the greatest monuments of human history. Unlike pyramids or cathedrals, they are not carved in stone but inked on paper, vulnerable yet enduring. Their survival is almost miraculous, given how easily they might have been lost. Their loss, too, is strangely fitting, for absence and mystery cling to Leonardo as surely as genius. What remains is enough to dazzle. What is gone keeps us dreaming. And perhaps that is the truest legacy of all. Not the answers he left, but the questions he inspired. Questions that stretch beyond centuries, pulling us into the same restless pursuit of knowledge that defined his life. For in the end, Leonardo da Vinci's legacy cannot be measured by pages counted or paintings completed. It lives in the very idea of the Renaissance man, the belief that a single mind, fiercely curious and endlessly imaginative, can attempt to embrace the totality of existence. His notebooks are not merely documents of a past era. They are seeds of possibility, scattered across time, still sprouting in the minds of those who dare to follow where his pen once led. And as long as humanity hungers to know, to create, to imagine, the spirit of Leonardo will live on, a voice whispering from faded ink, urging us always toward the infinite. In the twilight of history, when the veil between fact and legend blurs into something luminous and haunting, the name of Leonardo da Vinci does not merely appear as that of a painter, an inventor, or a thinker. It materializes like a vision, a shadow etched into the very fabric of human civilization. His life was not a straight path of triumphs, nor a clean record of completed masterpieces neatly cataloged. Instead, it was a mosaic of brilliance and failure, inspiration and despair, of half-finished projects and ideas that reached centuries beyond the grasp of his era. It is this very paradox, the incompleteness, the abandoned canvases, the experiments that crumbled into dust, that makes his legacy more mysterious and more powerful. For what, after all, is a Renaissance man, if not one who dared to reach toward every possible horizon, even when his arms were too human, too mortal to hold them all? In the candlelit corners of Renaissance courts, whispered stories circled about Leonardo like moths around a flame. Some remembered him as the man who could tame nature with a pen, who could conjure visions of flying machines that seemed pulled from the dreams of angels. Others muttered that he delved too deeply into secrets of the body and soul, prying into dissections with an obsession bordering on heresy. Yet whether revered as prophet or feared as alchemist, he embodied something greater than the flesh of his age. He represented possibility itself. It was this fusion of mystery and audacity, this seamless weaving of art, science, and engineering that carved his legend into stone long after his bones had vanished from their grave. Leonardo's projects were often left unfinished, a detail that critics of his own time seized upon. Patrons grew frustrated when paintings remained uncompleted, when architectural designs became too ambitious, when machines were drafted but never constructed. The Last Supper, for example, now fragile and faded, was the product of an experimental technique that proved unstable. His great equestrian statue for Ludovico Sforza, envisioned as a monumental bronze horse, never materialized because the metal was melted down for war. To many contemporaries, this might have seemed like failure, the legacy of a man unable to conclude what he began. Yet time revealed a different story. The fragments he left were not remnants of neglect, but sparks of genius, fragments of a vision too expansive for a single lifetime. If the Renaissance was an age of rediscovery, of returning to the wisdom of antiquity while reaching for new worlds, then Leonardo was its mirror and its oracle. He dared to insist that painting was not mere decoration, but a science of vision, a discipline equal to mathematics or anatomy. In his Trattato della Pittura, he argued that art had the power not just to imitate, but to understand, to distill the order of nature into form and color. He called for painters to study light, perspective, and the movement of water with the same rigor as astronomers studied the heavens. To Leonardo, the line between art and science did not exist. It was a fiction of lesser minds. He believed in a universe where the brush and the compass, the chisel and the scalpel were all instruments of the same divine search. And yet, for all his proclamations, Leonardo remained elusive, his notebooks locked away, misunderstood, or ignored for centuries. Many of his visions, flying machines, armored vehicles, hydraulic systems, were dismissed as curiosities, impossible contraptions sketched by an eccentric dreamer. But centuries later, engineers and scientists rediscovered in those pages the blueprints of modernity. A parachute that would actually work, helicopters eerily close to 20th century designs, anatomical sketches that anticipated medical breakthroughs. These were not idle fantasies, but glimpses of futures unborn. Thus, the unfinished became prophetic. The impractical became the foundation for later generations. What is most striking, perhaps, is how Leonardo's reputation grew after his death. In his lifetime, he was admired but often as much for his charisma, his wit, and his conversations as for his tangible works. King Francis I of France, who brought him to Clou in his later years, was said to have cherished Leonardo's company more than his paintings. The king allegedly called him the greatest mind of the age and delighted in speaking with him daily. But it was posterity that crowned him with the title Renaissance Man. In the centuries that followed, as his notebooks surfaced and his paintings became rarer treasures, his myth expanded. He was no longer merely Leonardo da Vinci of Florence. He became a symbol, a beacon of human ingenuity, a name invoked whenever we speak of genius that transcends boundaries. Legends grew around his image. Some claimed he could speak with birds, that his machines were stolen from angels, that his obsession with water was tied to visions of apocalyptic floods. Others whispered that he had discovered secrets too dangerous to reveal, that his hidden manuscripts contained knowledge forbidden by God. These stories, embroidered over time, only added to the aura that surrounded him. Where facts ended, imagination began, and in the gap between the two, Leonardo became immortal. The irony of his influence is that it thrived on incompletion. Where others built cathedrals, he left sketches. Where others wrote treatises, he left fragmented notes. And yet those fragments inspired more than many finished works of his age. To this day, only around 7,000 pages of his notebooks survive, out of the estimated 20,000 he wrote. Each surviving sheet is studied like scripture, revealing not just a man but a mind that roamed endlessly, charting rivers, dissecting muscles, designing gears, sketching wings, and musing on philosophy. His curiosity was not selective, it was boundless, unrestrained. Critics might argue that Leonardo's legend has overshadowed other important figures of the Renaissance, men like Brunelleschi, Alberti, or even Michelangelo, whose works stand completed and towering. But this too is part of the mystery of Leonardo's reputation. His influence lies not only in what he created, but in what he imagined. He reminds us that human greatness is not measured only in monuments completed, but in doors opened, paths illuminated, questions posed. In the silence of museums today, where the Mona Lisa stares with her enigmatic smile and the Last Supper crumbles slowly under the weight of time, one can still feel the tension of his spirit, a genius who straddled art and science, who lived between triumph and failure, whose very incompleteness made him eternal. He was a man of contradictions, illegitimate yet indispensable, distracted yet visionary, a perfectionist who rarely finished anything, and yet left behind works that changed the course of history. Leonardo da Vinci's influence is not confined to the Renaissance, it is timeless. Engineers see in him the father of modern mechanics. Artists see the soul of painting. Anatomists see a pioneer of the body's mysteries. Dreamers see the wings of flight, and philosophers see the eternal questioner. His reputation grew stronger after his death because humanity, generation after generation, finds in him a reflection of its own longings to know more, to see deeper, to touch the impossible. And so his story persists, not as a tale of completed triumphs, but as a legend of ceaseless striving. He remains the quintessential Renaissance man, a figure whose failures were as revealing as his successes, whose unfinished projects became gifts to the future, and whose name, like a flame in the darkness, continues to light the corridors of human imagination. To speak of Leonardo's reputation is to enter into a labyrinth. Each corridor leads to another chamber. Each chamber reveals a new angle of his myth. Unlike most figures in history, whose influence diminishes with time, Leonardo's name grew larger the further away he drifted from his own century. In life, he was known among patrons and peers. In death, he became a legend for the ages. This paradox alone makes him unique, for the reputation that defines him today was not fully forged during his lifetime, but constructed in the centuries that followed, through fragments, whispers, and rediscoveries. Imagine the scene after his passing in 1519, the French court still buzzing with admiration for their Italian guest, King Francis I, mourning the loss of a man he considered a friend rather than a servant. Leonardo had died in the Château du Clos Lucé, attended by his faithful pupil Francesco Melzi, leaving behind a mountain of notes, drawings, and unfinished designs. There was no great parade of paintings completed, no vast cathedral to mark his genius, no encyclopedic treatise polished for posterity. Instead, there were scattered remnants, a mysterious smile on a Florentine woman's face, a fresco already crumbling in Milan, an unfinished horse, and reams of paper inked with indecipherable handwriting. From such incomplete fragments, his reputation had to be built, and yet what a reputation it became. The centuries that followed turned those fragments into relics. Collectors hunted his notebooks as if they were scripture. Scholars puzzled over his mirror writing, suspecting hidden codes. Engineers marveled at sketches of helicopters, submarines, and tanks centuries before they became real. Artists looked upon his sfumato technique, the delicate blending of tones, and recognized in it the very essence of illusion. Philosophers cited him as proof that curiosity, when pursued without boundaries, could unite every branch of knowledge. Slowly, Leonardo's name detached from the context of Renaissance Florence or Milan and floated upward, becoming an archetype, the Renaissance man, the model of what a human being might achieve if guided by insatiable curiosity and unbounded imagination. Yet there is also something eerie about this reputation. It is as though Leonardo was too large for his own time, destined to be understood only in fragments by future centuries. Consider his experiments that failed. His attempt at a fresco technique for the Last Supper, a disaster in terms of durability, nonetheless produced one of the most studied images in Western art. His flying machines, unbuildable with the materials of his day, still demonstrated principles of aerodynamics that prefigured modern aviation. His anatomical studies, never published during his lifetime, were so accurate that when rediscovered they astonished medical historians. In every instance, what seemed a failure in one age became a triumph in another. His reputation, therefore, was built on a strange inversion. His failures were not signs of weakness, but proof of his vision. Legends began to surround him, legends that blurred the line between truth and imagination. Some whispered that he was born under a star of destiny, that comets had crossed the sky in 1452 to announce his arrival. Others believed he had secret knowledge forbidden by church or crown, locked away in his notebooks. There were tales of him creating mechanical lions for kings that could walk and roar, marvels that vanished as mysteriously as they appeared. Whether true or embroidered, these stories amplified his aura, presenting him as a figure not entirely bound by human limitations, but touched by something otherworldly. The Romantic era of the 18th and 19th centuries embraced Leonardo as a symbol of genius, misunderstood, a solitary visionary whose ideas were too advanced for his own age. Writers like Goethe and later figures of the Enlightenment celebrated him as the embodiment of universal curiosity, a man whose intellect refused to be caged. In this retelling, Leonardo was not merely an Italian artist, but a prophet of the human spirit itself. His reputation became entwined with the idea of genius as lonely, misunderstood, and tragic, an image that persists in popular imagination to this day. And yet, even as his myth grew, his works continued to provoke debate. The Mona Lisa, with its enigmatic smile, became a cultural obsession. Some saw in her face the mystery of femininity, others the perfection of Renaissance humanism, still others hints of secret codes or hidden identities. When stolen from the Louvre in 1911, the painting's fame skyrocketed. Newspapers across the world declared it the most famous painting on Earth. Through this single canvas, Leonardo's reputation reached millions who might never have heard of him otherwise. His influence spread not just among scholars and artists, but across the entire cultural imagination. Scientists, too, continued to feel his presence. In the 20th century, when aviation became reality, Leonardo was hailed as its spiritual ancestor. When medical schools examined his anatomical drawings, they recognized in them the work of a man centuries ahead of his time. Even modern robotics and artificial intelligence researchers point to his sketches of mechanical knights and automatons as early dreams of machines that mimic life. Leonardo's reputation transcended art. He became a touchstone for the very idea of innovation itself. But what makes his influence enduring is not simply the inventions or paintings, it is the atmosphere of mystery that surrounds them. Unlike Michelangelo, whose monumental works towered in clear completion, Leonardo's genius lies in suggestion, in the half-revealed. He leaves questions lingering. Why did he never finish so many projects? What secrets did he guard in his notebooks? Did he truly glimpse the future, or was it coincidence that his designs resemble modern machines? This air of incompletion ensures that he remains not just admired but endlessly pursued. Scholars still chase him, biographers still rewrite his life, filmmakers still dramatize him, and dreamers still invoke him. His reputation is not static but alive, constantly reimagined in each generation. Ultimately, Leonardo da Vinci's influence is a mirror in which humanity sees its own highest aspirations. For the artist, he is the master of light and form. For the engineer, the pioneer of machines. For the scientist, the anatomist of life itself. For the philosopher, the seeker of universal truths. Even his failures inspire, reminding us that genius is not about perfection, but about daring to attempt the impossible. It is this synthesis of art, science, and imagination that makes him the ultimate Renaissance man, a figure whose unfinished works echo more loudly than the completed monuments of others. And so, Leonardo lives on, not in a tomb long lost, not in the fragile walls of a Milanese refectory, not even solely in the Louvre's most crowded gallery, but in the endless hunger of the human spirit for knowledge, beauty, and possibility. His reputation grew stronger after his death because he became less a man and more a legend, less a painter or scientist and more a symbol of what it means to reach beyond the limits of one's age. His influence is eternal, his name immortal, his presence lingering like a half-seen shadow at the edge of history, always calling us forward, daring us to imagine more. Leonardo's afterlife, his reputation, was not a simple straight line rising steadily upward. It was more like one of his own sketches, a complex tangle of spirals, shadows, and interwoven threads, where meaning emerges only after centuries of careful study. The Renaissance itself recognized his brilliance, but could not fully grasp its scope. Giorgio Vasari, in his Lives of the Artists, 1550, praised him in exalted terms, calling him a man of divine talent. Yet even Vasari, despite his admiration, framed Leonardo in tones of wonder and frustration. How could someone of such boundless gifts leave so much undone? Already in the 16th century, his reputation was being sculpted around paradox. The genius who promised everything, yet completed so little. The painter who seemed reluctant to paint. The scientist whose discoveries remained hidden in secret notebooks. This paradox fed the legend. The incomplete became more tantalizing than the finished. Each abandoned painting hinted at an unseen masterpiece. Each cryptic sketch suggested worlds yet to be unlocked. Over time, the world came to believe that Leonardo had touched truths too vast, too dangerous to ever be fully revealed. This is why his reputation endures. He invites endless pursuit. The Baroque and early Enlightenment eras, 17th to 18th centuries, began to shift how Leonardo was remembered. For some, he was overshadowed by Michelangelo, Raphael, and Titian. painters whose monumental works dominated churches and palaces. Leonardo's comparatively small body of paintings seemed fragile against their grandeur. But then, collectors began unearthing his manuscripts. Suddenly, Leonardo was rediscovered not only as a painter, but as a thinker whose restless curiosity had spanned every field. The seeds of the modern image of the Renaissance man were planted here. By the late Enlightenment, philosophers and scientists, captivated by the ideal of universal reason, saw Leonardo as their ancestor. His notebooks revealed not merely artistic sketches, but scientific diagrams of water flow, the anatomy of the heart, the mechanics of flight. In an age when Newton had shown the universe to be governed by laws, Leonardo appeared as one who had intuited this centuries earlier. His reputation was reforged as a prophet of modern science, and yet the aura of mystery persisted. Why, people asked, had he hidden so much in mirror writing? Was it mere left-handed habit or deliberate secrecy, a wish to cloak his discoveries from prying eyes? The ambiguity only deepened the fascination. The Romantic era of the 19th century took this fascination to another level. Romantic thinkers were drawn to Leonardo's image as a misunderstood genius, an isolated soul who lived centuries ahead of his time. Writers like Théophile Gautier and critics across Europe began to celebrate him not just as a painter or scientist, but as a symbol of the human struggle for the infinite. In their imagination, Leonardo was almost a tragic figure, brilliant but unfulfilled, endlessly striving but never satisfied. A man whose gaze stretched so far into the future that his own time could not contain him. It was in this period that the phrase Renaissance man crystallized, not merely as a descriptor of Leonardo, but as a universal archetype, the human ideal of breadth and depth united in one. Meanwhile, individual works of art began to shape his reputation in dramatic ways. The Last Supper, already crumbling in Leonardo's own lifetime, became both a masterpiece and a metaphor. It symbolized the fragility of genius, beauty so profound it could not be preserved. Tourists and pilgrims visited Milan to glimpse what little remained, and writers described it in tones of awe, almost as though it were a holy relic. The painting's ruin became part of its aura. It was no longer just an image of Christ and his disciples, but a ghostly echo of a vanished perfection. The Mona Lisa, too, played a central role in Leonardo's reputation. By the 19th century, critics began to notice something uncanny in her expression. The mysterious smile, the subtle light, the hypnotic eyes, these details were magnified into myth. French poet Théophile Gautier described her as a sphinx of beauty who smiles so mysteriously. Walter Pater, in his celebrated essay of 1869, declared her older than the rocks among which she sits, a woman whose face embodied the mysteries of time itself. This literary elevation transformed the painting into an icon, and with it, Leonardo's name rose even higher. Then came the theft of the Mona Lisa in 1911. An Italian handyman, Vincenzo Peruggia, smuggled it out of the Louvre, believing he was returning the painting to Italy. For 2 years, the masterpiece was missing. Newspapers across the globe splashed the story across their front pages. Crowds gathered at the empty space in the Louvre, staring in reverence at absence itself. When the painting was recovered in Florence, its fame had multiplied 100-fold. Leonardo's reputation was now inseparable from the image of this enigmatic woman. She had become the face of art itself, and through her, he became the most famous artist in history. In the 20th century, his reputation expanded far beyond the confines of art history. Engineers marveled at his drawings of helicopters, gliders, and submarines, claiming him as a pioneer of aviation and modern mechanics. Doctors studied his anatomical sketches, realizing they were so accurate that they anticipated modern medical diagrams. Psychologists, too, analyzed his notebooks as a case study of creativity, an intellect where observation and imagination fused seamlessly. Even futurists invoked his name as the prototype of innovation, proof that human genius could leap centuries ahead. But it was not only scholars and scientists who kept his reputation alive. Popular culture seized upon Leonardo and turned him into a symbol recognizable to millions. He appeared in novels, films, comic books, and eventually video games. His image was reshaped again and again, sometimes the wise old sage, sometimes the eccentric inventor, sometimes the keeper of forbidden secrets. The 2003 novel The Da Vinci Code catapulted him into modern myth once more, suggesting that his works hid esoteric knowledge about the Holy Grail and secret societies. Though scholars dismissed such claims as fantasy, the public fascination grew. Leonardo became more than an artist or scientist. He became a cultural cipher, a man whose reputation was large enough to absorb legend after legend. And through all of this, what stands out is not simply that Leonardo was remembered, but how he was remembered. Unlike most figures whose reputations fade into the background of history, Leonardo seemed to grow brighter the further he receded into the past. He became a canvas onto which each generation projected its own dreams and anxieties. To the Enlightenment, he was a rational scientist. To the Romantics, he was a tragic genius. To the modern age, he is a visionary inventor and cultural icon. His reputation is not fixed, but living, fluid, and inexhaustible. Perhaps this is the ultimate measure of his influence. Not the number of paintings he finished, nor the machines he built, but the way his name has become synonymous with the highest reaches of human possibility. When we say a Renaissance man, we mean Leonardo. When we dream of universal genius, we see his face. He embodies the eternal hunger to know, to create, to cross the boundaries of what is possible. His failures inspire as much as his triumphs, reminding us that genius is not perfection but audacity, the courage to attempt the impossible. And so, Leonardo's reputation has grown stronger after his death, not by accident, but because he represents more than himself. He is a mirror in which humanity sees its own potential. The dream of infinite curiosity, the fusion of art and science, the refusal to accept limits. His influence endures not because he finished everything, but because he left so much unfinished, so many mysteries unsolved, so many questions unanswered. He left us space to wonder, and in that wonder, his name will live forever. And yet, even after centuries of study, exhibitions, translations of notebooks, and endless volumes of commentary, Leonardo da Vinci remains as elusive as ever. We can chart his influence across art, science, engineering, philosophy, and culture, but no chart captures the true essence of the man. His name has become shorthand for genius, but genius itself is a word that resists definition. Was Leonardo primarily an artist who happened to be fascinated by science? Was he a scientist whose vision found its purest form in art? Was he perhaps neither, something entirely outside our categories, a being whose mind inhabited a dimension we only barely glimpse? The further we reach toward him, the more he seems to recede into shadow, smiling like the Mona Lisa whose mystery defines him. Perhaps this is why his reputation has only grown stronger, because it is not closed, not fixed, not complete. It is alive in the questions he left behind, questions that each new generation answers in its own way. His unfinished projects beckon us to finish them. His cryptic notebooks invite us to decode them. His sketches whisper of worlds we might yet build. He does not hand us solutions. He challenges us to become seekers ourselves. And so, Leonardo da Vinci endures, not merely as a figure of history, but as a horizon we never quite reach. His influence is not only what he achieved, but what he suggests is still possible. He stands at the threshold of the known and the unknown, pointing outward, urging us forward. His life is less a closed book than an unfinished sketch, lines spiraling outward into the future. Somewhere in those 13,000 lost pages, perhaps there lies a thought, an image, a formula that could change everything. Somewhere in the smile of the Mona Lisa, there may be a meaning we have not yet unlocked. Somewhere in the ruins of the Last Supper, hidden beneath centuries of damage, there may still be a secret waiting to be revealed. The mystery is not over. The story is not finished. And perhaps that is Leonardo's greatest legacy, that he ensures there will always be more to discover.